look at is the effect of vanity. And where grandiosity was much more internal, it was about our being blind to our limits and all the problems that can lead to, vanity becomes more externally focused, and it becomes a pursuit of manifesting our inflated self-image into the perceptions of others. And there are a few ways we might do that. The first is an excess of material pursuits. So you might see this in overinvestment into social media, for example. People who spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy into constructing this very glamorous image on social media are being driven by by vanity, because they're attempting to essentially project this image that they have of themselves, or they want to have of themselves, into the minds of others, or into the perceptions of others. And then from that is derived a sense of pride. Another way to materially manifest your inflated self-image is to invest heavily into material items. So people who might go beyond their means in spending on flashy cars or on tons and tons of clothes to make themselves look very extravagant, or who spend too much time on their appearance, are being driven by this vain quality. Now, it's not that necessarily, investing a bit of time into having a nice social media page, or taking care of yourself and buying nice clothes and having nice clothes to wear, going out, dressing well, feels good. Investing a bit of time and money into that isn't necessarily vain in excess. But what is when that investment becomes excessive, when you're spending so much time working on your appearance that you lose time when you could be learning new skills, developing products to sell, and so on. There's also the problem of vain goals, which is essentially when the driving force to achieve some goal is no longer a matter of the work that you're going to have to invest into attaining the goal itself. It's no longer about that goal, but it's about the admiration and the accolades that you'll receive for accomplishing that goal. And that becomes especially problematic first in the pursuit of that goal, because as you're pursuing that goal, you'll see another more flashy accomplishment, something that has a higher potential to evoke more admiration from your peers or from the public, and so you'll jump ship and go pursue that goal, because it's not about the goal itself, it's about that admiration that you'll receive at the end. Another way vanity will drive us is in a more immaterial sense, and this can be seen in our identities, or in the qualities that we assign to our self-image. And when it's inflated, this becomes especially problematic, but this occurs even when the self-image isn't inflated. And it's essentially the idea that let's say we prioritize being intelligent, or intelligence is a value of ours, and we become vain, right? Or perhaps even our self-image becomes inflated, and we want to manifest that inflated self-image to reality, and we believe we're much smarter than we actually are. What happens is we no longer seek intelligence or seek knowledge to be intelligent for the sake of being intelligent. We begin trying to be intelligent we begin seeking knowledge in order to appear intelligent to others. And that's a very important distinction, because when we're trying to be intelligent when we're not trying to be the smartest, but we're trying to appear to be the smartest, we'll start engaging in very surface level learning, where we'll learn quick facts and little things, and we won't actually go into deep learning that's required to actually produce anything that actually matters. Confucius said this in the Analects, I believe is where I got this quote from. He says, "Men of antiquity studied to improve themselves. Men today study to impress others." And now Confucius laid out a lot of principles of learning and a humility in knowledge, or exemplified a humility in knowledge. And I think this quote very simply expresses the difference between those who study and learn to impress others and those who do it to impress them, or to improve themselves. And we want to be the types who improve themselves, who perhaps study history in order to understand why things happen, and then use that understanding in order to better their own life, instead of using that understanding as a conversational tool to seem smart at a dinner party. Why we want to manifest our inflated self-image into reality is because we want to attain that social feedback. And a huge part of building a self-image is looking at our social feedback. Ultimately, at the end of any vanity-driven action or pursuit is that desire to evoke some admiration or some envy from others. And the desire to evoke admiration doesn't sound too evil, per se, but I think that the desire to evoke envy certainly sounds very kind of ridiculous. Like, only the most evil of people want to evoke envy. Or maybe not evil, but the most conceited people want others to envy them. But I think if we all kind of take a step back and spend some time actually looking at those situations where maybe we weren't necessarily attempting to manifest our self-image, but we saw somebody else witnessing our accomplishments, we can kind of see within them the want to be us in that moment. And there's a very pleasurable line of thinking that comes from that. And there's a sense of self-reassurance that we get when we see that. And so vanity essentially drives us to manifest this inflated self-image. by pursuing that. And when we get addicted to that, or when we chase those moments, we'll attempt to evoke envy in various situations through various means. That may be in seizing every opportunity we have to express our inner intelligence and show how smart and brilliant we are, or demonstrate to the public our keen political insights. Not necessarily for the importance of those insights themselves, but to be able to show our rhetorical skills. So there are a couple of ways that these attempts to evoke envy or even admiration can go. The first, I think, is a fairly acceptable form. It's, every friend group has those dick measuring competitions where everyone's like one-upping each other, like, oh yeah, I got laid last night. Oh yeah, I had a three-way last night. Oh yeah, I freaking invented fusion power last night. Oh. I think in these cases it's pretty normal, and it's not necessarily inflating. Generally that happens in a context where our weaknesses have been on display in some degree, and inevitably we're all going to make casual boasts from time to time. That's not necessarily going to ruin your life. What's also possible, and this is what comes into play when you have an inflated self-image. The second option would be boasting in excess and attempting to hide your flaws. And this happens two ways. The first is essentially ineffectively, where people see through your boasts. They see your clear attempts to hide your flaws, hide your mistakes, your inability to admit when you're wrong, and your heartbreak on other people when they're wrong. This often takes the form of negative external redirection, positive internal redirection, or inward redirection. So negative external redirection is where there's some negative light shown on you, not necessarily in an aggressive sense, but in some regard, and instead of taking personal responsibility or admitting mistakes or taking that as an opportunity to explain oneself, they redirect that negative energy elsewhere. The second is positive inward redirection, where there's some positive light that's to be shown, and they try to switch it possibly from somebody else to themselves. That's often in those cases where a group works on a project and somebody takes all the credit for the project. The first case might be when there's a group works on the project and there's it turns out bad, and they direct all the bad points to other people and all the good points inwardly. And they can do this subtly, but it can generally be seen through. And oftentimes when people do this, there's a general loss of respect for them. The second way that this can be done is when the desire to evoke envy, to manifest inflated self-image, is done effectively. And so we can think about how the inflated self-image is very grandiose, right? It ignores the weaknesses, it capitalizes on the flaws, it makes you seem as though you're capable of much more. And inwardly, for the internal world, that leads you to making many mistakes. And when you feel that sense of grandiosity within yourself, you go on to set grandiose goals, for example. But when you can manifest that grandiose feeling about yourself into other people about you, then you can very effectively stimulate admiration in them, but often you risk evoking envy in others. And some people are more prone to envy than others. But this can lead you very, very vulnerable to attack from envious individuals. And we're going to get more into that on the next section, which is on vulnerability, the vulnerability strategy of pride. Vanity essentially makes you, where it all comes down, is it makes you blind to the enemies that you're creating by manifesting your inflated self-image into their perceptions. This is, and we'll get into this more later, but it's also possible to evoke envy without necessarily being vain and attempting to manifest an inflated self-image, but just having a lot of strength, and other people are very susceptible to envy, then envying you for that. And that's something that you'll have to be able to defend against, but using the principles that we're about to discuss, you'll be able to defend against it.